We are going to start the session with quite a substantial gap to the downside, and that leads me to check higher time frames first. Monthly, we are now negative on March, and we have those weeks above 3800, so higher prices getting rejected. Still inside month, not much happening here. Below 37.17 we will be one time framing lower on monthly, so this is important area for monthly. Looking at weekly, we have third negative week, and for now inside week below 37.80. We're going to start to continue one time frame lower. Last week was lower than the week before, so we are one time framing indeed, but inside week might be start of balance or rotational trade. Quickly looking on daily balances, still within balance. Lower boundary of that balance is at previous week's lows, and we are now around previous balance zone. And 5% correction is going to be around 37.60, so a little bit lower, and as of now we are below this high volume node from previous month, and from January high volume node is around current price, and below we have low volume until 3700 area. And let's check options. We are now around previous week's close, so around fair prices, and still over around 120 points to cover to get to lower boundary or higher boundary. However, we are very extended on the Bollinger Bands. We are below or around 2.3 standard deviation, so it is fairly extended on the downside. Looking at previous balances, I've checked how recent drops developed, and here we had this drop in September. It did stall a bit around first balance that we had earlier, and then we had some balance and drop which didn't retrace below a previous bigger balance, and then we rallied. We didn't make new all-time highs, and then we dropped and this balance low held, and later we had this huge rally, and another dip was fairly shallow, and we had this balance not that far from all-time highs, and we didn't break previous swing lows, and if we count this as a balance, we certainly didn't get below. And now we are dipping once again. Here this balance area was just near all-time high, so it's not that important. The most important area is going to be this swing low, which is around 3700, slightly below, and this old high volume node. So until we break this area, I think that bigger time frame trend is still intact. We have stoppage of one time framing on monthly a little bit higher, around 37.17. So it is like a buffer here. If we break those prices, then we might see some bigger correction. Let me just check monthly. If we did stop one-time framing, we did in September and October. Well, we had 1 month lower and then inside month, so only very briefly we stopped one-time framing on monthly, and other than that we had COVID, which trended down for a while, but yeah, and other occurrences were with monthly ranges being quite tight. So looking at current development of this down move, we are now around a gap which wasn't filled on multiple attempts, and today might be filled finally. And we will retrace this entire rally from end of January. I'm little bit worried with the markets. I was turning bullish around here, but now it might seem that we are going to see some bigger down move. However, with VIX being quite elevated and substantial put buying, I would think that this down move should be constrained, but it is what it is, and we will see. So going into today's possible scenarios, we are opening with a gap, and overnight inventory is net short but balanced, so I do expect some adjustment of this inventory, but it is not trending, so it's not that at that extent. If we start with an early push higher, I'd like to see for example exhaustion around half of the gap and rotation back to the middle and back to the lows to finally fill this gap. If we fill the gap, then I will be monitoring if we create an excess here and get below yesterday's range. If we start with acceptance below, then I will short this market. Similarly, if we create an excess below overnight lows and start one-time framing higher, I will enter longs, maybe on a pullback, or just right away if we start second time frame above, and I could put my stop below overnight low, below this gap fill. And another scenario is that we will start with sharp move to the upside, maybe pull back and then move higher. So if we see multiple time frames, multiple TPOs building above yesterday's lows, then I'd like to trade to the long side, targeting this point of control. And important would be breaking overnight low or breaking overnight high, because breaking one side would limit breaking the opposite side quite substantially. It is possible, and given that yesterday we had 57 points of range and overnight is only 42, we might cover both of those extremes, but it is less likely than just breaking one of the extreme. We are fairly below spike base from yesterday, so lower prices are being accepted. This is the most negative scenario, and I will be monitoring this area. If we cannot build acceptance lower, I might start looking for longs later in the session. If and another possible long scenario is if we break lower and start building lower prices, but point of control won't migrate lower. So if we build, for example, something like this, then I'd like to enter longs. Not sure about any structure that can develop on the way down, but I would like to try enter with defined risk to break this, for example, poor highs, and get this move to the upside, because this scenario would be shorts trying and trying but not getting much of their efforts, so getting higher would squeeze them. But this is not the case today. We might see some volatile ranges, some bigger move to the downside, so really interesting session ahead. I must note that I have some problematic positions from yesterday, which are outside of my basic strategy, so I'm not sure if I'm able to day trade properly. I might need to manage those and finally stop trading with undefined risk. Just trade always with defined risk or defined time frame, so I could treat them as options plays and just exit if the scenario isn't working